the SLY Guy.
Hello and welcome once again to the SLY Guy Podcast, the people's podcast, the podcast in which I speak about stuff for 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, that's the gist of the podcast. That's it in a nutshell. How are we all doing? How is everybody's form? This week has been a long one, let's be fair. It sort of culminated by having a snow morning. I want to say a snow day, but a snow day lasts an entire day. This was a snow morning. We got out in the snow, myself and the kids, built two very basic snowmen. If anything, shit, you would say. But obviously, you don't want to just admit that to a 3-year-old child. You want to be like, see that snowman you made? It's bollocks. You know, it's a crap attempt at a snowman. And I should just be careful in what I'm calling it a snowman. I know some people may be offended by that term. I should have said a snow person, because technically I didn't give my snowman any particular genitalia to differentiate it between any genders or to be non-gendered. In fact, what I did, I actually built both genders on my snow person. I built a penis inside the snow person's vagina. Now, not in a sexual way. It was inverted. It was facing out the way, so it was a snow person. Anyway, we're losing a run of ourselves, but the snow day wasn't a lot of fun. And now this is the day after the snow morning. It is Sunday. It's Valentine's Day, the day of love, the day of sexiness, I guess. The day of sexiness, the day of love, the day in which Clinton Cards celebrates making some major dough by a holiday that's just been made up, probably by Clinton Cards, or indeed by Hallmark, who I believe are like the original kings of cards, you know, back in the American card world. I mean, I don't know if that's a thing, but listen, if I don't know about something, do I shy away from it? No, I dive into it head first and get stuck in. I make mistakes, but this is what we're all about. Welcome to this week's SLY Guy Podcast. Whoa, sometimes, here's the thing, right? See, with this podcast, I just kind of wing it. I talk about things, I throw stuff out there, and sometimes I'm like, I'll just start and see where the podcast goes. I'll start talking about things, and that'll make a lot of sense, you know. But then obviously the introduction is weird, and people might be like, what the fuck is this podcast that we're listening to? But here we are. We're here anyway, and I appreciate you tuning in to what a lot of people do call the most underrated podcast in the country. But we're doing it. It's nice to be here as usual. It's nice to be speaking to you. Again, listen, I'm a bit fed up that we're still having to record the podcast in my dining room. I'm very hopeful that if restrictions loosen slightly, you know, we'll get back in the studio. I'm hoping for March. I'm actually, you know what? The Snake Rat listens to this because he is a producer of the podcast, so he'll hear this. I just want to say, Ben, listen, whatever happens, let's get back in the studio in March. Get yourself a wee mask. We'll use sanitizer. We have enough distance. We don't have to be near each other. It'll be safe. Let's get back in the studio for the listeners. They need it. We've got this sweet new microphone and sound system. We just need to get back in the studio. And once again, like Gordon Ramsay, at one of his many restaurants, we are cooking with gas, you know. But listen, another couple of weeks here and we'll be back where we need to be, because I know a lot of people like to watch this podcast on the YouTube, you know. That's fine. I appreciate that. Maybe some people think, you know, it's not visually as exciting when we're here in my dining room, which, let's be fair, it isn't, okay? You know, it's not as nice as being in the bespoke SLY Guy studio. And as each week passes that we're here, the more I start thinking about, fuck it, let's just paint this back wall black and stick a SLY Guy logo on it. Now, is it my dining room that I actually have in my own house? Yes. Would my wife be really cross about that? Yes. But let's just hope we get back in the studio soon, because this is not a sweet backdrop. But listen, you guys, the listeners, the supporters of the podcast have been keeping the listen numbers up, and I appreciate that. I know for me personally, I'm an audio guy. When I listen to podcasts, I like to listen on the go when I'm driving, you know, like stick it on, play it through the speakers in the car and just listen to the podcast on the go. You know, that's what I like. So I hope that you guys who are audio guys will appreciate the new and improved audio, and hopefully that's been pleasant in your ears to enjoy. Because, you know, I don't really get much time to like sit and watch stuff on the TV. And whenever I do watch stuff, I think my wife would have a problem if I said, listen, can I watch a podcast on the TV? She'd be like, no, you can't. You're either doing podcasts, thinking about podcasts, or you're creating a new podcast just to spend less time with me. So when the time you do spend with me, we're not watching podcasts, we're watching TV and or Netflix. Now, this week we got a series into us this week, a whole entire series, albeit it was a limited series, but a series nonetheless. If we're just having like a casual night and we don't want to get involved with too much in the way of like, you know, like a hard-hitting full drama series, you know, something really serious, really heavy, you know, something like Men Behaving Badly, you know, we would normally save that for like, you know, for our focused attention. Whereas if we were like, you know, chilling, having our dinner, just something in the background, we would watch more lighthearted entertainment. Now, a lot of people want to know what goes on in the Elliott household. You know, a lot of things, but also what goes on the TV is we would watch stuff like the most recent series we finished was Power, which was good. You know, that's more of a focus thing, but like light entertainment, what do we like? We like shows that involve places, traveling, and quirky communities. So the shows we like to watch are anything Jersey Shore related, because I just love those guys. I don't know why. You know, on paper you'd be like, oh, this would not be a show for Dave, but I think now they're all old guys with kids and stuff. I love it. I enjoy that. I like to watch The Glens, I think it's called, the BBC NI show about just like the Glens of Antrim, which is a nice time. And the reason why we started watching The Glens was because the Blues weren't playing. No, because we like Devon and Cornwall, which is one of my favourite shows as well. It's just about the goings on in Devon and Cornwall, and I mean, it's a nice time. Lots of like, there was a new port defence wall being put in a wee village yesterday that I was watching. Lovely time. You know, there's things like bringing animals to shows, fun stuff like that. You know, exciting things like that I like to watch. You know, lighthearted entertainment to let what little hair I have left down. But this week was a Netflix week of excitement where I was getting pumped about a show that I've been waiting for a number of weeks now. Has finally dropped and I was excited. It was one of those shows, you know, shows that you get excited about Netflix that you put on your list before they're released, so whenever that comes out you're like, oh yes, there it is. The last thing like that I got excited about and put on my list was The Night Stalker, and hey, what an enjoyable documentary that was. Very well done, creepy, gripping, true crime drama about the serial killer Ricardo Ramirez, aka The Night Stalker. So what's that? Enjoyed that a lot. Would recommend. This new show, again, true crime. I was waiting for it for a number of weeks. I saw the advertisement for it. I was like, on the list. Straight away, buzzing. And the show was Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. Now I just want to say, hey, listen, it's not the Cecil. It's Cecil. There's one E. You know, I worked with a fella called Cecil once. If you called him Cecil, he'd drop the nut in you in a second. You know, he would not like it. He'd be like, listen, my name's not Cecil, it's fucking Cecil, so call me Cecil. So I was buzzing about seeing this show. You know, I thought to myself, this is going to be great. I have an interest in this particular place, the Cecil Hotel, because I nearly stayed in it a few years ago, and then I looked it up online and I was like, nah, probably don't want to stay there. So this show was coming out. I was getting excited about it. Let's say, like, excited. You know, I was buzzing for it. And, you know, here comes the spoiler alert. So if you're going to watch it, you know, maybe stop listening to this next part. But spoiler alert, so shit. Like, honestly, I thought it was 4 episodes. I think they were an hour long each. What a waste of bastard time that show was. Like, after 1 episode, I'd have gone, if I'd have switched off, I'd have gone, okay, that'll do me. You know, it's not for me. Because, like, when it started off, you know, it started off very, very promising. It sort of, like, gave you a wee bit of history of the hotel, you know, kind of told you that the Cecil Hotel was, like, built sort of in Hollywood, early stages of Hollywood, that whole old Hollywood era when Hollywood the sign was Hollywoodland. You know, it was being developed. It was like the old school movie star scene. You know, it was just classic vintage Hollywood, and it's an interesting era, an era that I would, you know, I like to see things from that time. It interests me. You know, it's an interesting era, but this particular hotel has also a very interesting past. Starting from when it was built, there have been undoubtedly horrific things that have happened in this particular building. Murders, suicides, you know, drug overdoses, and like it's not just people dying. You know, it's not just people just being found dead. It's people dying in horrific ways, like raped, strangled, having their throats cut, just fucked out a 10th floor window, like horrible, horrific, awful things. They're happening. There's actually one case which I'd known about, but seen in this, about somebody who jumped off the hotel to commit suicide and landed on some old guy just on the street. So he was dead too. Like, imagine that. You're just an old guy just deciding to yourself, listen, I'll head out, I'll get the newspaper, I'll go back to the house, feed up, read it. So imagine like me, going out, hands in your pockets, down into the shop to get a Sunday Life, and then you look up, and before you can say, bollocks, someone's crashed down on top of you, and you're titty bread. You know, that's going to be potentially as sly as you can get. You know, if you're just, like, that's the worst thing. See, it's bad enough if you die, but see if you're just doing something so innocuous and mind your own business. Like, that guy's probably up in heaven going, oh, for fuck's sake, of all the ways to go, like, you know, it's just not sweet in the slightest. And at the time, whenever they found this guy, they thought maybe he had jumped, and they're like, nah, guy's his hands in his pockets. He had his shoes on, which is a sign, apparently, if you jump, your shoes come off. Well, my message is, if you're going to be doing that, tighten them, you know, tie your laces, you know, and then do it. But he did that, and, you know, it was just shit. You know, what a terrible way to go. So a load of people have died in this hotel, and oh, there goes my phone out of my pocket. I should have made a joke that was my penis falling out, but it's very small. So yeah, it was interesting, the actual history of the hotel and knowing what sort of went on there. Serial killers stayed there. You had the Ricardo Ramirez, the Night Stalker himself, stayed there for a bit. And even in this documentary, they were like, yeah, and he would have just been, you know, he would have actually come back to the hotel on the 14th floor, just gone to his room, just taking clothes off in the alleyway, and then just walked up to his room. My question being, who's the eyewitness reports seeing a dude come to a hotel, soaked in blood, just taking his gear off, throwing it in an alleyway, walking up to the room, and not phoning the police, and that guy to go, here, listen, there's a guy that regularly comes back here covered in blood. You know, that in and of itself, problematic, you know. So that was like the history of the hotel, first sort of episode, which at this point, I'm enjoying it. You know what I mean? I'm thinking to myself, this is a good show. It's what I want. Then it sort of focuses on one particular case that went on in the hotel, and that was the case of a Canadian tourist called Elisa Lam. Now, basically, Elisa Lam ended up dying at the hotel and was found dead, naked, in a water tank on the roof of the hotel, which in and of itself, very creepy situation, very odd situation that had happened to her. And what was extra gross about it was, whenever she was found, it was only because water pressure in the hotel had dropped, and people were saying that the water was tasting a bit iffy. You know, it was a bit brown and a bit iffy. And then a caretaker went up to the roof to check. He's like, what the fuck's wrong with these water? Alex, that's what's wrong with it. There's a person in it. There is somebody in there steeping like a tea bag, and we don't need that. There's the problem. So that's how they found her up there, which was pretty horrific. So there was this big manhunt for her for days. You know, she'd gone missing. People were like, where's she gone? Again, weird that they searched the whole hotel and didn't look in there, you know, but that was it. They were sort of saying, where's she gone? Something's happened to her. This is terrible. Then footage emerged of her inside a lift inside the hotel, acting what can only be described as very peculiarly, very strange. I'll probably say very peculiar. You know, that she was being very strange in a lift. Like, it can only be kind of, I don't even know how to describe the footage. You know, it's just like she was being very strange. Like, she was like peeking out of the lift, looking around the corners to be like, hee. Like, it was almost like she's playing like some sort of strange game of like hide and seek or something. Hee. It was weird. She was like stepping against the wall, like just looked like she was, I guess I want to say slightly, possessed or something. She looked like she might have been, if you believe in all of that, you thought to yourself that maybe this girl's possessed by the devil or something, if you believe in all that. But it was just very strange behaviour. And then, so she ended up being found dead, and people are looking at this footage going like, how did she end up dead? How did she die? Was she murdered? That's the initial thought, is, was she murdered? Now, when the program started getting a little bit weird to me, was it started bringing in YouTubers. Now, like, with opinions, web sleuths, as they were called, which, I mean, I think it's a weird title, and I think that web sleuths or YouTubers are maybe not the guys to be doing that. These guys are YouTubers, they're vloggers. They're not police, not detectives, they're vloggers, and they just decide, listen, something's fishy here, we're going to get to the bottom of it, and we're going to see what's going on. Now, I want to say they're conspiracy theorists, they're vloggers or YouTubers, conspiracy theorists, and ultimately, like 9 out of 10 conspiracy guys, they're not entirely, I don't want to say, they're missing something, these guys, you know what I mean? They're like, I don't want to say losers because that's a bit harsh, but you know what I mean. Let's just say they have a lot of like Star Wars figurines on shelves in their houses. Like if you were to go into their top drawer beside their bed, you're more likely to find, a Jar Jar Binks Warhammer toy than you are a pack of condoms. That's all I'm saying. They've different priorities, different courses for different horses, or different horses for different courses, whatever way that saying works. It's the one of the way. But they're not the kind of guys whose opinions are going to be effectively very productive in terms of a detective case, of a missing persons case. And there's one particular guy who I found to be especially weird, and like, he made me feel a bit uncomfortable. He was like, he came on and was like, I wasn't happy with what was going on in this case. I had to investigate this myself. And the guy went on to say, I'm not exaggerating here, but I put in over 1,000 hours worth of investigation into this case. And you're sort of thinking to yourself, 1,000 hours? Like, let me put that into perspective. 1,000 hours is over 40 days. And that's not like 40 just from being awake, 40 full days. That's 40 days of just being at your computer investigating. No pissing, no eating, no shitting, no sleeping, just consistently. That's like saying on January 1st, you're like, or 31st of December, sorry, you're like, my New Year's resolution is for 40 days non-stop, I'm going to investigate this case. And then you just stay there until like the 10th of February. That's longer than most people last in your New Year's resolutions. And this guy has solely investigated into the case. You know what I mean? And with all due respect, that guy, what a loser. What are you doing in your life that you can afford to put 1,000 hours of investigation into this? Like, and by investigation, I assume he means just sitting behind a computer screen talking to other dorks in chat rooms, and they just, from their sort of conspiracy world, think they have a better take on the case than experienced detectives who have access to the actual crime scene and proper evidence. You know what I mean? Like, they think, oh, listen, there's something up here, we need to get to the bottom of it and we're going to solve this. Whereas like actual police with evidence won't know as much. And what was funny was the evidence that they were looking at from their web sleuth point of view, some of it was being concealed by the police, because they're like, obviously we're not going to put the full evidence like just out in public, because that's fucking stupid. It would compromise the case. So these guys are going off already strewing evidence that isn't even accurate, and they're coming up with these ridiculous kind of conspiracy theories as to what happened, basically. You know what I mean? And therein lies the problem with the internet and social media. People can say whatever they like, form whatever opinion that they want, and then they'll spout it and say it, and like other idiots will just get on top of it, and then they will take that as fact, even though it's just based on opinion. No, so although the police and investigators have all this evidence and they're like, oh no, we're looking into it, these people, these sleuths, I guess you call them, decided that they knew what was going on in the case, and they decided that they're just going to say, listen, we know in fact who murdered her. She was murdered, we know who did it, and it was this guy. And the guy who they went for was like a murderer, like how you missing this, police, is a death metal guitarist called Morbid. Now, let me just say, if ever there was a case of judging a book by its cover, this is what they did to Morbid. Now, yes, this guy Morbid, he's a freak, no doubt about it. He's got a freakish sense of style. His style, it's not a million miles off, another guy who's pretty prevalent in the news at the minute, Maz Manson. He's got that sort of like white paint all over his face, long black hair. He's got like some blood marks in his face. Got the fake eye color lenses in. It's overall just like a freaky looking dude. And they're like, no, Morbid killed her because he wrote a song about death in water, and then she died in water, and he was at the Cecil Hotel. I'm like, stop calling it the Cecil Hotel, it's a fucking Cecil. And he was there, and they were like, he did it, he was at the hotel, he killed her. Now again, with the web sleuths being the way in which they are, these online conspiracy troll guys are like, he did it. Didn't look at the actual fact that he was at the Cecil Hotel, but yeah, a full year before, she was there, so this guy, definitely a weird guy, definitely a death metal dude, rock on, but maybe a murderer, no, those guys are morons, so, but again, being like those what those kind of internet people do, those guys who like sort of view themselves as like self-righteous internet social justice warriors. They did what all good people like that do. They trolled the life out of the guy until he's basically suicidal and decided, hey, fuck it, I'm quitting music, I'm not doing it anymore, the thing I love, I'm ditching it because I'm being mercilessly trolled by these fucking know-it-alls on Facebook telling me I murdered this girl who I've never met. The guy actually had to do an apology video, like a video to say he was innocent. And like, again, when he did it, he wore a really weird mask and distorted his voice. Strange behavior, but the guy's called Morbid. The guy is called Morbid. Morbid is just, I think it just translates as to do with death. That's what he is, the death guy. So he writes songs about death. He is death metal, and he's called Morbid. And these guys are like, he killed her. All he should have done in that instance is be like, oh, when was he staying at the hotel? Oh, it was a year before. And then I go, all right, sorry about that, Morbid. Not these guys. They just assume that's what happened. And they said he killed her. That was it. And then that was the case. Now, obviously, all these guys put a lot of time and effort, these sleuths, these dork dudes, into the case. And then basically what happened, they're just like, nah, it was, that's not what happened. Basically, when, again, this is a problem, that people do make decisions based on opinion rather than fact. Whenever the facts started being added together about what happened to Elisa Lam, you saw that she was unwell. That's literally it. A clearly very unwell woman who had a bad mental episode and unfortunately, for whatever reason, got into a water tank and tragically drowned. That was it. That's what they should have had. One episode of this show, then said that, and then that would have been fine, But obviously, to make this show, they had to have some sort of alternative info. They had to try and build up a sense of allure and intrigue into the case, which, by the way, they did. Episode 1, I was scared. I had the willies going to bed, and also when I turned on the light to go upstairs, the electrics tripped in my house. So I was like, oh no, the Cecil ghosts are in my house. It's not very good for me. I didn't like it, and it gave me the willies, but that's what they did. They sort of built those episodes up and made kind of drag on a little bit. And now the sister of Elisa Lam did come out and say, like, basically the behavior of her in the elevator. She was like, listen, she's done stuff like this before. She's had mental health issues, and we try to help her, but sometimes this sort of behavior, it's not out of the ordinary, basically, for her, but they were like, oh no, it can't be, morbid killed her, you know. And then they were saying like, oh, she was found with the lid on the water tank. Again, in the actual series, episode 2, more spoilers, the caretaker was like, yeah, whenever I went up to see the water, why it was going slow, why it was brown, I went on top, looked in and saw Elisa Lam. Then he actually said the hatch was open when I went up there. And then you can only assume he just popped the lid back on, so it was, you know, a bit of decency, keep her covered out of the sunlight, whatever. And then until the police came. So they're all going, oh, she couldn't have put the lid on herself because she'd be underwater. And it's like, no, well, the caretaker must have done it because the lid was off whenever she was found. You know what I mean? And the guy who was like giving off the most about it, and he was like, you know, really into it, and he was just the creepy guy that I would be sort of the most concerned about in the whole show, was like, I couldn't rest till I knew what happened to Elisa Lam. I could not rest until I knew what happened to her. And then all it would have taken would been the police to be like, listen, you know, that's what happened. Like, even their autopsy, they were like, no, it couldn't happen, I guess. And they're like, well, it did, you know. Pathologists aren't going to lie about that. But they looked at that and he was like, I can't rest until I have closure. All in all, at the same time, while he's doing this sort of shit, making blogs, visiting her gravesite and just fucking traipsing around this hotel, making videos for YouTube, is her parents probably can't get over it, you know? So while you're trying to get over stuff for yourself, Mr. Weird Online Guy, you know, maybe just pack it in and let the girl rest in peace, let her family have a bit of closure. Maybe think about that, eh? You know? And also maybe when we're thinking about things, the police maybe keep a wee eye on that guy's internet activity. You know, we spend thousands of hours looking at things and a case, an investigation that he has no body about. Maybe just see what else he's doing online. You know, there may be other things that he's getting up to that may be problematic. You know, that's just what I'm thinking on that front. That being said, what I will say about the show that was something that I actually spoke to my wife Catherine about afterwards, was it was interesting to see how people view mental health. Like, her mental health, she suffered from bipolar disorder and wasn't, like Elisa Lam, this is not my wife, because I realised the way I said that it might have sounded, but Elisa Lam suffered from bipolar disorder, wasn't taking the medicine as it was prescribed to her, but yet that whole, maybe, you know, she just had a bad mental episode, was totally ignored by like the majority of the web sleuths and all these guys. I hate that phrase, by the way, a web sleuth. Basically YouTubers, you know, that was overlooked because, you know, I think how it was presented, like Elisa Lam looked like a fairly, you know, she's a pretty seemingly very normal girl. You know, in any photos you see of her, you think, oh, she's a good looking girl. She looks, you know, like she doesn't have, you know, anything wrong with her. You know, you look at her and you just think, oh, she's just another, like an average person. You know what I mean? You wouldn't, like, by looking at her, assume there were these difficulties that she was going through. And obviously her mental health wasn't managed correctly, whether that was by herself or whatever, and it unfortunately ended up costing her life, which is terrible. You know what I mean? You don't want that to be the case. But I think what was interesting about it, and we discussed, was because she looked this way and seemed to be like, you know, she's a student, like a smart, normal, a pretty girl. You just assume she was fine, and people are very quick, I think, to assume that if you look a certain way, you're grand. You know, like, it couldn't have just been attributed to her having a little episode. Something must have happened to her. No, she couldn't have just had like a bad mental period and then, you know, this accident happened. Someone killed her, you know what I mean? And like, even in the documentary, like, people were saying the people she was roomed with were like, we need to move because we think this girl, there's something wrong with her. You know, they didn't know obviously to what extent, but it was just interesting because you can't tell how somebody is just by how they look. You know, I think then that's a problem. In terms of mental health, like, you would look at somebody and maybe judge them when you don't know that they could just be in a real shit place. Like, you could look at her and think, oh, she looks totally with it and totally normal, but really she's having, you know, a really bad time. And mental health problems, mental health difficulties can be suffered by anybody, no matter how sort of good looking they are, how successful they are. You know, mental health doesn't have any, physical signs. Some people can hide it. Obviously it does have physical signs, but it can also be a silent issue. It could be a problem people are suffering with inside their own head. It could just be that sort of mental issue. For example, when people were saying, oh, Ted Bundy couldn't be a serial killer because he was handsome. I would disagree about the fact of being handsome. To me, average looking guy. Jeffrey Dahmer on the other hand, yummy. But you look at him, and if you're just judging, oh, good looking people can't do that, you'd be like, what the hell, and I just think, especially in times that we're going through at the minute, like with lockdown and other things going on, like lockdown definitely brings feelings out in people that maybe they haven't had before, and I don't mean any sort of sexual feelings or anything, just like feeling especially shit or having difficulties with their mental health that maybe they haven't had before. And I think that's, was what we were chatting about this film, was that Elisa Lam looked grand, in terms of the photos you see, what's presented of her, but then you see from what you assume, again, always just assuming by looking at people, then you see her in the lift, you're like, that's something not right there, when realistically her sister was like, that's kind of, she has these moments, so if you knew, and that's the problem, the people you might know, your friend, your family, somebody who you might be having a tough time is having a tough time. And I think this week for me was probably my most difficult week in terms of lockdown and stuff. And I just didn't realise because I kind of ploughed on a bit, and it was only when I finished doing the radio show on Friday night that all of a sudden it just felt awful, like just a real sort of feeling of depression in my tummy, like a real, like I'd just been hit in the gut. And yeah, it was weird. Like there was no real reason that I could think of for me feeling like that, other than it was just, I had a busy week, a bad week, I guess. But then all of a sudden I just felt like I could cry. Like I finished the radio, I was just sitting in my car for like 10 minutes, and I was like, I just feel really sad. I was really down out of nowhere. There was no reason. And then I started thinking to myself, there's no reason for me to feel like this. What a weirdo. And thinking about it at the time, I was like, oh, maybe it's because I got so hyped up for the show. I was buzzing for that hour and a half that maybe I had some sort of like adrenaline dump or something. By the time it was finished, I came out and sat in the car and I was just like, But like I had a lot on last week, a lot of stressful things happened, a busy week. The kids were wild, the weather was bad, so we couldn't get out with them. Just cooped up in the house. It was a tough week, but at the time it just felt grand because you just cope and you just do what you have to do to move on and get the next stage. And like each day was just almost a battle. You the day comes, you're like, right, how can I hurry this day on to get to bed? How can I hurry this on? Because it's just the monotony of lockdown and quarantine. It is tough. And I actually went to bed at 9 o'clock on Saturday night. I was just like, I'm busted. And I think, now that I did that, I feel rested. I feel good. The feeling of like sadness in the pit of my stomach is done. Like, it's gone. I feel, great about it again. And what I did that I think helped me was I spoke to my wife about it. I just said, listen, I feel really sad. I don't know why. I don't know where it's coming from. There's nothing that's springing to my mind that's going to make me rationalize how I feel. I was like, there's nothing that I can say, this is the cause of this. I just feel sad. And it was through saying that to her, she was like, all right, okay, well, what can I do for you? What can I do to make you feel better? And I was like, probably nothing. I just wanted to let you know that's how I'm feeling. So in case like, I go home and I'm in a mood or something, or I'm just not myself, don't worry about me. I just feel a wee bit sort of down. So by telling her that, that was great, because she wasn't like, oh, snap out of it. She was just like, what can I do to help? And I think knowing someone's there to share a problem that you have takes a big burden off. And then again, like 2 days later, I feel like I'm grand again. Like, and I think whenever I had probably my worst bout of, depression, really, that was, I haven't really had it for a few years now. But whenever we moved house, I was moving house, getting married, having kids all around the same time. A lot of stressful things that I think I'm coping with. I just had a bad mental period, where I went to the doctor and he was basically like, yeah, I'll give you antidepressants. I decided against taking them because it did feel better by just talking about them, and also they would have just kicked in the day I was due to get married. Like the actual date I was due to get married would have been the first day, and I got buzzed off my antidepressants. So I didn't want to be doing that, mainly because they're like, you can't have a pint in your wedding day, and I was like, well, I'm gonna have, do that. But it was interesting for me because I'd never had any issues, never had anything that I could attribute to making me feel shit. But then they were like, look, this happens. You have bouts of difficulty with your mental health. It can happen to anybody, and it's how you deal with it. And, each person is different. For me, it was just chatting about it helped. Then now that I know what the I guess triggers are, or what the feelings are, and when you feel shit, for me now, rather than just initially just sort of lying on the sofa and feeling shit, I'll tell my wife. I'll be like, listen, I feel depressed for no reason. Even saying that, I feel depressed, and somebody going to you, that's all right, what can we do? That makes you go, all right, I'm not a burden on somebody else with how I'm feeling. I'm not going to put pressure on them. It is what it is, and you just have to try to, cope with it. And for me, that's something I think worth, talking about. And I think there's this part of me that thinks, again, I'm not an expert in this, I can only speak from experience, but I think there's maybe some people who, maybe get the same feeling in their gut that I got, and they just feel like, oh, they're the problem, or, they just want to bottle it up, they don't want to speak to anybody. And maybe for some people, when it gets so bad, they feel that the only way to remedy it is to hurt themselves, or to take their lives, even if it gets to that point. And for me personally, luckily, I've never reached that point, and I hope it never to again. And again, you can only react to what goes on as it's happening. You know what I mean? And again, for me, the main thing was talking. So basically, in a roundabout way, the Cecil Hotel show on Netflix was a bit shit, but out of that, it sparked an interesting conversation, which, hopefully people can have, and the stigma around mental health can be something we can all address more, and I know I've spoken about this before in the podcast, and people are probably like, oh fuck, here he goes again, but I do think it's such an important thing to talk. For me personally, that was what the difference was. If I'd have gone to my doctor and felt no better, I would have gone on the antidepressants, but I just thought, to me, just speaking about it, being able to verbalize how I was struggling was like a weight off my shoulders. So if you have any friends or any family members that you're worried about during lockdown, or you feel that they're maybe not themselves, or you notice a difference in their behaviour or personality or attitude, just speak to them. You don't have to give any advice. You just have to offer yourself there to listen. A lot of times, people aren't looking at advice if they're struggling or having difficulty. They just want you to be there to listen to their problems and not judge them, or tell them to snap out of it, or wise up, or fucking move on. Just go, all right, that's how you feel. And again, hopefully that'll change. And I can only say from my experience, anything that I have been through has felt better after speaking about it. So guys, listen. Just listen, just listen, lend an ear, be there for people that you think may need it. If anyone reach out to you, don't say they're being stupid, don't say anything else, just say, all right, what's up, let's talk, and then just be there. And I think that's the message that I would like to get out to people. Is like, things do feel better, maybe at some point at a time you don't know how that'll be possible, but it does, and for me, I feel good again now. When I'm recording this podcast, I feel good, and I mean, this is the most gross segue in history, but what would also make me feel good would be if you bought tickets to my Ulster Hall show. Now, I just looked down on my list of things to talk about, and Ulster Hall just happened to be after the Cecil Hotel, so I ended up going from wanting to talk about the Cecil Hotel to promote the Ulster Hall. It literally just says promote the Ulster Hall, so that just has connected. And again, listen, that is something that I'm excited about. However, it is to an extent a little bit stressful too, so obviously I try not to worry about that side of things. It doesn't really get to me, but if people were to buy all tickets, I wouldn't have to promote it, it'd be grand. But I am doing the Ulster Hall as it stands on the 17th of December this year. Tickets are on Ulster Hall website, and Ticketmaster. So please get your tickets if you want to come see me. It's going to be a really good show. I've been writing more of it. It's feeling good. Can't wait to try it somewhere. I might even have to do like online gigs to just say the words so that I'm going to be saying in the show. So yes, that's what I need to promote. Basically my Ulster Hall show. Other promotion that I have is Patreon. My Patreon's doing really, really nicely at the minute. I've started doing an extra podcast over there, the Serial Killing podcast, where I talk about infamous serial killers and cases throughout history with a comedian guest. Now, the idea behind it is, yes, these are all very serious topics, but again, there should be elements of humour and things, and if we as comedians can bring humour to even the most darkest of cases, that's great. So that's what the Serial Killing podcast is. There'll be 12 episodes of that coming out. Episode 3 is out this Friday, so if you're listening to this on Thursday, it's out tomorrow on my Patreon, and it's going to be featuring Rory Woods, where we talk about the case of the Ripper of Rostov, Andrei Chikatilo. Very interesting case, very fun episode, to be fair. Woodsy was a cracking guest, so check that out on my Patreon. By the way, over there too, I now have a new tier on Patreon for Slyhards. So if you're one of my original patrons and you are subscribed to my Patreon for $5 a month, you are a rider Sly. You're the day ones. You've been there from the start. So you get all the bonus content, all the bonus podcasts, any extra clips, stand-up clips. You get voting rights. Very, very much an interesting topic, voting rights. I feel very much like I am a 1960s president or something, but you get voting rights, and you're just there from the start. So you get all content if you're there. If you just want the podcasts, which is the weekly bonus podcast I'm recording after this episode, which I'm sure will be another bundle of laughs, because hasn't this episode been hysterical? It's been, imagine you're saying to your friends, listen, you should listen to Dave Elliott's Sly Guy podcast. It's really funny. He's such a funny guy. He's so he's such a wild man. And then you come on, sometimes you'll feel a bit shit and blah, but it is how it is. This is a podcast. You get the ups, you get the downs, you get the funny, and then sometimes we get a bit more serious, but that's the nature of it. So if you want the bonus podcast too, fire over there. This podcast I'm recording now is the 52nd bonus podcast that'll be on Patreon. So you have a hell of a back catalogue there, plus 2 episodes of Serial Killing It, more to come. So yeah, there's lots to do over there. There's going to be some more changes being made once as well. I can get back with my boyfriend Ben and get some stuff filmed. So it's going to be a fun time over on Patreon. So get on board now if you want to be a rider Sly, get the full access to everything, including early merch and tickets and stuff. Or if you just want to be a Sly Hard, you can get the bonus podcast for $2. Pop on over. I welcome one. I welcome all. Speaking of things I welcome shaved balls and dicks, because the Sly Guy podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. Now, Manscaped are trying to cheer people up in 2021 by offering the best in men's below the waist grooming. They have precision engineered tools for your family jewels, and they've helped over 2 million men all across the world get rid of hair in their balls. Now, if ever there was a company with a slogan that you wanted, that is it. Listen, we've helped over 2 million men all over the world rid their hair off their balls, rid their balls off hair. Manscaped are really trying to do that by making you fresh in 2021 with the perfect package 3.0 that has all the right tools for the job. Come out of quarantine with clean balls thanks to the Lawnmower 3.0. This waterproof and skin safe trimmer will reduce next to your 2 best friends. The 3rd generation trimmer even has a light to give you that glow up you need in 2021, baby doll. It's also time to freshen up your balls whenever you're on the go with a crop preserver, an anti-chafing ball deodorant, and moisturizer. We already put deodorant in your armpits, so why not get them ballsed up as well? Balls up your deodorant on your balls as well. You don't want to be spraying a body spray down there and then your balls end up turning to ice and just fall off. Nah, use the crop preserver and keep your balls smell fresh to death. They also have in there the ball toner spray as well, which is pretty dope. That's exactly what you want. You just give that a wee spritz, make your bits feel incredible. And they'll even throw in their shed travel bag to keep all your goodies stored comfortably. And speaking of comfort, they've anti-chafing boxers in there too. Wow, the best underwear you'll ever wear. And guys, hairy balls is so 2020. You know, you want to be 2021, you get your balls shaved. All right, girls too, listen. You don't want a bush. You want a clean box. I mean, there's nothing else to say. You know, you don't want to have a hairy box. You know, there you go. I can't say anything else. But if you want to have shaved balls, clean boxes, and you want to get some Manscaped gear with 20% off and free shipping, get to manscaped.com and use the code SLYGUY. That's all caps, SLYGUY. You know, it's Valentine's Day when I'm recording this. I should have said it last week. Give the gift of love. Give the gift of a Hollywood box. You know, that's what you want. 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com with the code SLYGUY. And listen, support this podcast. I know a load of big podcasts all across the world have Manscaped as sponsors, but listen, the wee guys, the most underrated podcast in the country needs your help. Get Manscaped, get your balls shaved up the hoods. And so the SLY Guy podcast is also brought to you in association with Modest Beer. Modest are an independent brewery crafting small batch beers for discerning drinkers. Brewed and canned in Hollywood, County Down, Modest are on a journey with one clear goal in mind, and that's to bring exceptional brews to the local craft beer market. Modest are not here to revolutionise the craft beer movement. Oh no sirree, Bob. They're just here to add to it with a brand that's joyous, responsible, honest and modest. If you're keen to know more, contact Modest Beer on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Modest Beer or www.modestbeer.co.uk to find your nearest stockist. Wow, that was a fun read. This episode's been a bit of a misery. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not feeling super hysterical this week, but listen, we'll troop on. And listen, I'll get annoyed about things, I'm sure, soon enough. Listeners' questions, let's hear what you've got this week. Michael Kerr, hey Dave, opinions on sea swimmers. Speaking of getting annoyed, that's something to get my blood boiling. But listen, Mick, we've been there, we've spoken about sea swimmers before, and I don't want to get myself riled up anymore. Chris Porter has said, do you agree that Vittorio Angeloni has gone from looking like Crusaders legend and IFA coaching fuck up Dermot O'Carroll to looking like the cop out of Pulp Fiction who fucks the gimp? I tell you what, I'm going to say I don't think Vittorio looks like Dermot O'Carroll, but what I will say is the cop in Pulp Fiction who fucks the gimp, he looks a lot like that guy. To be fair, it's a very good lookalike call, and I'd be keen for you, if you listen to Vittorio stuff, to get in touch with him and let him know that, because it's a great call. But in terms of the look, I think what you're saying is one guy's got short hair, one guy's got long yellow hair, which is what Vittorio has now. And I think, you know, in terms of, do I agree? No, I don't agree. He looks like Dermot O'Carroll. I do think he looks like the cop that fucks the gimp. But I mean, what I will say about that particular look that he's gone for, I think if anybody, you know, goes out of their way to make themselves look more like Jimmy Savile than they already do, that's a problem. You know, and I think to go for that exact Savile hair, problem, Vittorio cut it. Come on, my man. Naomi Mitchell, lawyer accidentally goes into Zoom court with a cat filter and reassures the judge he isn't a cat. Yeah, I saw that video. This guy goes on the Zoom, he's like, oh, I've hit a filter here. I'm not a cat. I mean, that was classic. But definitely, if you're going to be putting a filter on a Zoom call to be a cat, don't be doing it when you're going into court, you know, especially if you're that guy who the lawyer's representing. You're like, I'm in the name of fuck Gerald, what are you doing? He's like, I'm meow. You know, not a good idea. Sensei Flood said, here, Davey, was thinking about a Patreon exclusive. You, me, Nathan Concilia, Violin Mick, all head down to Helens Bay, align our chakras, praise the moon that's falling into Capricorn, and just have a whale of a time taking a dip. Now, I don't think we should do that. I'm not getting in the seawater because Helens Bay is connected to a shipping channel. There's high mercury levels. If you can't eat the shellfish that comes out of there, I'm not putting my shellfish in the water. And in terms of like star signs, you know, they're a bit weird in my opinion, but listen, if it makes you happy, more power to you. Enjoy the star signs, enjoy that personally yourself, just live in the moment. But if you're telling people, you know, to live their lives due to the forces of Aquarius and the pull of the fifth moon of Saturn, you know, maybe don't be giving people advice. Owen Kelly has said, hey Papa Gaptooth Stonehead, sexy guy, Owen. A few months back, I wrote in to say I was living the life of a 16-year-old virgin living with my parents in lockdown. Well, I passed my driving test today, so things are looking up. Congratulations, my man. And remember, keep it below 45 and make sure you keep baby wipes in the glove box. Love the podcast, you funny man. Keep it up. Thank you, and I appreciate that. You know what? If you're like Owen and you think I'm a funny man, you want to support the podcast other than Patreon, rate and review it on Apple Podcasts. Having it a new review this week. Well, I have it a couple of 5 stars, which I appreciate, but I like a wee written review that can read in the podcast too. So, if you want to do that, that would be absolutely great. Jack Core said, have you heard of Glenn the Psychic? He reminds me of you, Jack. I had not heard of Glenn the Psychic until you sent me that, and I checked him out. And you know what I liked? He's just a sassy Belfast guy. I don't know how much of a psychic he is, but he's classic. So I recommend that my listeners go on to Facebook, search Glenn the Psychic, support his page. Get behind this guy because he is classic, and I have a lot of time for Glenn the Psychic. And you know what? I might actually break my policy of having no guests on the podcast and get Glenn the Psychic on, because I like him a lot. And what's weird is Jack said he reminds Jack of me. I mean, that's an honour in and of itself. Matthew Johnson said, Papa Bear, don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying raving it up on a Friday night, but I was just wondering if there's a Dave Rockdown in the pipeline. Listen, guys, get in touch with Radio Ulster and say you want me to have my own rock show, because I'll do that. I think that's what the people want to see. I want to play more rock. It's my favourite genre. And listen, I would do a Dave Rockdown anytime. As a wee change from the rave lockdown, for sure. Now, spoke earlier about web sleuths. I myself was somewhat of a sleuth this week whenever I put all the pieces of the puzzle together to figure out H-Star's real name. Helen, I know your name now. I figured it out because you wrote in for a shout out to the rave lockdown and you requested a shout out to the Starrett crew. And I was like, bingo, that may be what the star comes from. Starrett. Whoa, my mind just blew, and I think I figured that out. So now I know what H-Star means. I thought it was just some sort of nickname. I get what you've done there. I've cracked the code. Let me join the LAPD and solve the cases of people dying in water tanks. Helen said, Helen is coming in hard with all the questions. Have I missed the questions? Only saying this now. How was your walk around the coast last week? So first of all, no, you haven't missed the questions, because here it is. How was my walk around the coast last week? It was a lot of fun. Did I blister the feet of myself? Yes. But listen, it was worth it because it was a very enjoyable experience. Have you seen the Hotel Cecil on Netflix? Yes. I covered that at the start of the podcast. Also, where do you ask questions for the Patreon podcast? On the Patreon. I ask questions every week. Like the call out for questions is on Patreon. If the call out is still there, if you see it on Patreon, you still see there's a call for questions, that means I haven't recorded the Patreon podcast yet, and you can still ask questions. So as it stands now, you can still ask questions because we're doing the Patreon podcast later on. All right, so that's how you do it. But thank you for the questions, Helen. And Phil McCambley has said, I know you're a big fan of Gervais and David Brent. My question is, who is the better comedy creation, David Brent or Alan Partridge? You know what? They're both great comedy creations. I myself prefer David Brent, but like in The Office. So like I liked him in the series, The Office and the spin-off and stuff, or the Christmas special. Didn't like him in Life on the Road. I think he became too much of a character in and of himself. I think he suited to the surroundings better. So in that, I would say Alan Partridge probably is a comic creation. Is probably better because you can do him in other scenarios, and take him out of, the sitcoms that he's in and put him into just individual scenarios, whereas I wouldn't like Brent as much there. But in terms of like characters in a setting, no one's better than Brent, in my opinion. That was a good question. I liked it. Shane Todd, when will you shave your head? You know what? This guy can just fuck off, because he's only asking when am I shaving my head because he is getting at me for going bald. Now I know I'm going bald and I'm going to shave my head. The time hasn't been right to do it, And the only reason he's asking that question is to get at me because he tried to grow a beard this week. And like he went to the radio and I was like, he took his mask off and I was like, Have you grown that on purpose? He had just a beard on his lip and here, just this part and here, and I said to him, is that on purpose? That you've, like, why haven't you let a bit grow here or whatever? And I said to him, he looked like either Jamie Kennedy, Adam Driver, or just a rat. I said, like, what is with that look? And if he had just said to me, listen, I just, I want to look a certain way. And I was like, well, what's that, a musketeer? And if he'd just gone, yeah, I want to look like Aramis. I'd have gone, respect. If you want to look like Aramis, that's the look you're going for, the musketeer beard. Fair play. If he'd have said to me, listen, I want to serve under Louis XIV, I'd said, big respect to that too. But, I just said, listen, that's not a good look. For me, the musketeer beard is not in fashion. It's similar to me going to him and saying, like, with curtains and going, is this a good look? You'd be like, first of all, the curtains are definitely very much open there, and also, they're very much not the current hairstyle. Do you know what I mean? So I'll just say no. And this guy is just, he's fucking obsessed with my podcast. Every week he'll ask a question on Twitter, and it's always fucking snarky. Like, I'll put a tweet out and be like, oh, any questions? And he'll write no. And then every single week, without fail, there's little geeks that think this is really funny, or like, give it a like. Oh, he's so funny. Oh, what a funny guy. When actually what he's doing is just getting at me because he's like an abuser. He sees that, oh, how dare they make fun of him? Let's ridicule someone else and make them feel shit. Nah, not having it. And maybe if he's less obsessed with my podcast and focused a little bit more of his own podcast, maybe he could host it by himself without having to rely on a guest to come on and be funny every week. But I guess I suppose there's only so many times you can laugh at your own jokes and say your own name over and over again. So good luck to him. I wish him well, but don't get at me with fucking hair. And on that note, actually, I need to promote our radio show, of course, the Shane Todd Show, Shane Todd's Rave Lockdown on Shane Todd's BBC Radio Ulster between 6:30 and between 6 and 7:30 p.m. Shane Todd Radio Ulster. Mark Beggs has said, "Good morning, big sexual." Ironically, that's what my wife calls me too. What's your favourite comedy show while growing up? For me, it was Bottom with Ian Edmondson and Rick Mail. Brilliant show. # highly recommend. For me, growing up, favourite show growing up was comedy wise. That's a tough question. I mean, what South Park? Is probably the one that, like, as a teenager, I enjoyed South Park an awful lot. So I was probably at South Park. There you go. Okay. Probably a terrible impression. And the last question from Red13 has said, do you prefer tea or coffee, and what is your favourite biscuit to accompany your hot drink of choice? I mean, I'm a big fan of coffee and a big fan of tea. Breakfast tea in and of itself is probably hard to beat, but then I like a coffee. I like a black coffee. I like lattes. It's hard to call. It's however the mood takes me. Currently, I'm drinking tea because it's a Sunday and I want to relax. But it's hard to call. It's a tough question. But what I do like to dip, I'll tell you what I can tell you. It's chocolate hobnob would be my favorite biscuit to dip. And that's that really. That's as much as I can really say on the matter. And that, I think, let me see. Oh shit, nearly an hour long episode this week. A bit different, I guess. But here we go. We've got to the end of the episode. We have covered a lot. Mightn't be the funniest SLY Guy podcast in all time history, but it was fun, I guess, in some respects. And hopefully, if you haven't laughed this week, you maybe get something different out of it. Hopefully that if you are out there and you're feeling lockdown or feeling shit, you can chat about it, clear the head a bit, share a problem shared's a problem halved. And yeah, we just gotta keep trundling on. And on the next week's podcast, if you want to listen to more of this riveting content, get over to Patreon and subscribe there. If you haven't already, rate and review the podcast, please do that as well. Check out all the sponsors as well. The links are in the bio. And if you haven't yet, buy tickets to my Ulster Hall show on December 17th. Other than that, guys, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week. Alrighty. Bye.
I'm the sly guy.